So this is going to be a completed discussion on Chapter 10, Lifespan Development. So I'm naming it Part 3. The first part was done last week. First two parts. We had an online as well as in class. And now I'm going to complete this online in a video lecture on lifespan development. So we're going to continue talking about gender and gender differences, and right now we're looking at gender role development. So by age 2, children are really aware of their gender roles, believe it or not. They do recognize that boys should be strong, independent, they'll be aggressive, dominant, achieving, whereas girls, they're taught that they should be soft, dependent, passive, emotional, as well as naturally interested in other children. So this existence of similar gender roles in many cultures is kind of suggests that the evolution in biology is possibly playing a role. However, with most research, it's emphasizing that there's two major theories of gender role development, that being social learning and cognitive development. With social learning theory, it's emphasizing the power of the immediate situation and observable behaviors that's on gender role development. It suggests that girls learn how to be feminine and boys learn how to be masculine, and it's done in two ways. First, they'll receive rewards or punishments for specific gender role behaviors. And then secondly, they'll watch and imitate the behaviors of others, particularly that of the same-sex parent. So a boy who puts on his father's tie or baseball cap wins big indulgent smiles from dad, and mom for that matter. But what would happen if he put on his mother's nightgown or lipstick? Parents and teachers, as well as friends, they'll generally reward or punish behaviors according to those traditional gender role expectations that's been taught down the line. So a child that socially learns what it means to be a male or female. And according to the cognitive development theory, social learning is just part of the gender role development, but it's much more than a passive process of receiving rewards or punishments and modeling others. Instead, cognitive developed mentalists, they'll argue that the children will actively observe, they'll interpret, as well as judge the world that's around them. So as children starts to process information about the world and gain world views, they'll also create internal rules that's going to be governing the correct behaviors that would be for boys versus girls. And on the basis of these rules, they'll form these gender schemas, or think of them as mental images of how they should act or how they should be. Now, what I'll ask of you to do is you'll pause the video, take a moment, and rate yourself in terms of one, that you never or almost never true to any of these particular attributes, or can go up to 7 that you'll always or almost find it true for yourselves. Okay? Now, what you'll wind up doing, you're going to rate it between 1 and 7, right? Then you'll add up the points for all the odd numbered items. Then add up the points for all the even number items. And if you have a higher total on the odd number items, then basically what it's saying is you're masculine. If you find the score is higher on the even numbers items, then you're more feminine. But if you find that you are pretty much evenly scored between the both of them, then what that means is saying that you may be what we call androgynous. So take a moment and do this, and no, I won't put it in the, I don't think about it, about as far as your assignment, but I do want you to take time and just do this for yourselves. All right, so let's talk a little bit about androgyny. One way to overcome rigid or destructive gender role stereotypes is to express both the masculine as well as feminine traits that's found in each individual. So, an example would be being assertive and aggressive when necessary, but also being gentle and nurturing. Combining these characteristics in a way is basically known as androgyny. So researchers have found that masculine and androgynous individuals will generally have higher self-esteem and creativity. They're going to be more socially competent and motivated to achieve, as well as exhibit better overall mental health than those with traditional feminine traits. What makes androgyny and masculinity the adaptive? Well, based upon the studies that's out there, it shows that traditional masculine characteristics like analytical thinking, independence, they're going to be more highly valued than those traditional feminine traits, which is affection and cheerfulness. So another example might be in business, a good manager is going to generally be perceived as having predominantly masculine traits. Also, when college students in 14 other countries were asked to describe their current self and the ideal self descriptions for both men and women contained more masculine than feminine type qualities. These recent studies have been able to show that gender roles are becoming less rigidly defined, and we talked about that in class. However, with Asian American and Mexican American groups, it shows that some of the largest changes toward androgyny had occurred. And then in terms of blacks, they remain among the most androgynous of all the ethnic groups. So we're really versatile. We are able to show both feminine and masculine traits, and we're kind of equaling that out. All right, so looking at cultural differences on development. Our development is kind of rooted in the concept of self. We are more individualized than Eastern countries. But how we define and understand ourselves is that very concept of self-reflection for our culture. In individualistic cultures, the needs and goals of the individual are going to be more emphasized over the needs and cultures of a group. And when asked to be able to complete the statement, I am, people from individualistic cultures, they'll tend to respond with personality traits. I'm shy, I'm outgoing, or they'll discuss their occupation. I'm a teacher, or I'm a student. When we're talking about collectivistic cultures, though, the opposite would be true. The person going to define and understand primarily by looking at his or her place within the social unit or the social group. Relatedness, connectedness, as well as interdependentness is more valued as opposed to separateness, independence, and individualism. So when asked to complete the statement, I am, people that come from a collectivistic culture tend to mention their families or nationality. I am a daughter, I am a mother, I am Chinese, and so forth. Now, if you're North American or Western or European, you're going to be more likely to be individualistic rather than collectivistic. And you may find that the concept of self-defined in terms of others almost is going to be contradictory. So a core selfhood probably seems intuitively obvious to you. And being able to recognize that over 70% of the world's population actually lives in a collectivistic culture. However, may it prove your cultural sensitivity and prevent misunderstandings if you have that understanding about these other cultures. So North Americans, they're generally going to define sincerity as behaving in accordance with one's inner feelings, whereas the Japanese may see it as a behavior that conforms to a person's role expectations, that being carrying out one's duties. So you can see how Japanese behavior might appear insincere to a North American as well as vice versa. Now, we're going to check out some of these developmental challenges that may happen through our adulthood. What are your relationship expectations? Here's one of these slides that, once again, that I'll ask you to pause and take a look at in terms of figuring out for yourself, what do you expect in a relationship? So take time and answer yes or no to each of these questions. And then you might want to jot this down because I may ask you to do this as an assignment. But just think about those, and hopefully we'll get back to this where we can have a discussion about it. Or I might just throw this in a discussion board and get you to give me your thoughts there. But here's something I want you to understand. There are potential pitfalls of relationship expectations. Think about it. Do you want to have a successful relationship and then avoid a breakup or a divorce when you get married? Well, one of the first steps is to be able to examine your personal dreams as well as the expectations that you have for long-term relationships. So think about where they came from. Are these expectations realistic? I know some individuals, I'll use my sister once again. She'll kill me if she knew I was sharing this, but I'm going to go ahead and share it anyway. She has the expectation that in order to be with a man or a suitor, so to speak, that she hopes to start the date, that they have to be 6 feet over, they have to be dark skinned, and they have to be muscular. That's an expectation. And she's rigid in that thought process, as she will not date anyone that doesn't meet that criteria. I have a friend who also had a criteria of, well, if they don't have money, they have to be making 6 figures and establishing a career that she feels is worthy. Otherwise, she won't have anything to do with them. And she did get married to someone just that way. However, unfortunately, she didn't think about other qualities that her husband had. And unfortunately, she deals with domestic violence on a regular basis. So the question is, are these expectations realistic? Marriage therapists as well as researchers consistently found that realistic expectations are going to be a key ingredient in whether you'll have a successful relationship or not. So first thing you want to be able to do is establish what we call love maps. It's thinking to yourself, do you believe that emotional closeness is naturally developed when two people have the right chemistry? And that's where you continue and you answer these questions for yourself. Make up your own love map. Okay? All right. Now, committed relationships. One of the most important tasks that we face during adulthood is establishing that kind of continuing, loving, sexual relationship with another person. Yet, navigating through such partnerships can be challenging. Like, for example, approximately half of all marriages here in the United States end in divorce, with serious implications for both the adult and child development. It impacts it greatly. So for the adults, both spouses generally will experience emotional as well as practical difficulties and usually become high risk for depression and physical health problems. In a lot of cases, these problems are going to present even before the marital disruption. Realistic expectations, again, I have to push there, are going to be a key ingredient for that relationship to be successful. Yet, there are a lot of people that will harbor unrealistic expectations about marriage and the roles that the husband and wife play, like opening a door or, pushing and creating all kind of havoc for the marriage. So, looking at families, here's where it can get really deep. And abuse occurs in so many different shapes and forms within the family dynamic, that being physical, verbal, as well as emotional. Family violence is going to happen more likely if the marital relationship is struggling, if there's any type of substance abuse. Uh, Mental illness can be a factor, as well as economic stress. If you're struggling to make ends meet, of course, we may project onto others what we're feeling. Uh, if there's social isolation, poor communication, as well as poor parenting skills, as well as being impulsive, these type of situations can lead to violence within a family dynamic. If you know of someone who's in need of assistance, by all means, you want to be able to help get them out of the situation. And sometimes it's not easy to say is done. So you can always refer someone to something to help them get themselves situated. This is one type of resource that you can utilize. It's SAFE program. Uh, and basically what I'm help them do is, if they're dealing with domestic violence, or even if they just need counseling or so forth, they can help put them in the right direction. Now, resiliency. Resiliency is being able to adapt to anything that comes at you. Okay? Despite the odds, there'll be some children who are able to survive and even prosper in the worst situations. Okay? An Ann Maston at the University of Minnesota, as well as a Douglas Catsworth at the University of Miami, back in 1998, was able to identify specific traits as well as environmental conditions that would promote resiliency. And again, know that that's the ability to adapt effectively in the face of any threat or challenges, which this seems to be able to account for the resilient child's success. So good intellectual functioning, it can be help that resilient child be able to solve problems or be able to protect themselves from any type of adverse situations. So just remember that resilient children will demonstrate good intellectual functioning. They usually have caring relationships with their parents or other adults, and they're able to regulate their attention, their emotional being, as well as their behaviors. Now, work and retirement. Too often, however, these career choices are going to be driven by dreams of the high income. Nearly 74% of college freshmen surveyed through the Higher Education Research Institute said they want to be very well off financially, and that it was very important or essential to their being. 71% felt the same way about being able to raise a family. So work and retirement is a key factor in adulthood development. Where do we go from here? Do I have the right career? Am I going to be successful in the skin I'm in, so to speak, career-wise? Positive careers will help us to promote our health. It'll help with our relationships, how we spend our leisure time. Because if you're making money, if you're working and you're content with what you're doing, you will be able to prosper. And if you prosper, then you'll travel. You'll have the home that you wanted to have. You'll be able to raise the family you wanted to raise, and so forth. Now, according to the activity theory of aging, successful aging appears to be most strongly related, to good health, control over one's life, social support systems, as well as being able to participate within the community and social activities. The activity theory of aging largely displaced the older notion that successful aging would entail a natural and graceful withdrawal from life. This disengagement theory has been seriously questioned as well as largely abandoned. I only mention it to you because it's a historical relevance and because its connection to the influential modern theory and socio-emotional selectivity theory, which we'll talk more about on the next slide. So, social-emotional selectivity theory. This is a perspective that helps to explain the predictable decline in social contact that almost everyone experiences as they move into their elder years. According to this theory, we really don't naturally withdraw from society in our later years. We kind of just become more selective with our time. We deliberately decrease our total number of social contacts in favor of more familiar people who provide emotionally meaningful interactions. That's like on the slide here in that graph. Me, myself, I have 5 people that I consider true friends. And I think we talked about this earlier in the semester. I recognize 5 people as friends. Everyone else is what I consider an associate, someone that I may interact with, but who I wouldn't say I can depend on them in terms of saving my life. Only 5 people I have that I would call a true friend. Now, there's a number of popular beliefs about age-related type of crises, that's not really supported through research. The most popular idea of a midlife crisis really began largely as a result of someone named Gail Sheehy's book, Passages. Sheehy drew on the theories of Daniel Levinson and a psychiatrist, Roger Gould, as well as her own interviews. And what she did was she kind of popularized the idea that almost everyone experiences a predictable crisis around the age of 35 for women and around age 40 for men. Middle age often is a time that one would re-examine their values as well as their lifetime goals. But her book kind of led a lot of people to automatically expect that they're going to go through a midlife crisis with these drastic changes in their personality and their behaviors. Well, through research, it's been suggested that a severe reaction or crisis may actually be quite rare for a person, and it's not typical of what most people experience during middle age. For a lot of people, they believe that when the last child leaves home, that most parents are going to experience what we call the empty nest syndrome. That being this really painful separation and time of depression for the mother or father or both parents. Again, research has seen that the empty nest syndrome may be a little exaggerated in terms of the pain experienced by some individuals in an effort to downplay the positive reactions. Think about it. A lot of parents get happy when their kids go off to college or they're moving out on their own because, one, it shows that a job well done. My sons, they grew up, they are on their own, they are living their lives, content, so forth, and I'm free. I started having children in my early 20s. So for me now, with them being adults, I have more time for me to try things and do things. So I really didn't experience what they call the empty nest syndrome. And there's a lot of parents who haven't. So one of the major benefits, though, of having the emptiness is that there's an increase of marital satisfaction. Parents can get back together again without having to hide behind closed doors. Moreover, the parent and child relationships, they'll continue once the child leaves home. One mother has said that having the emptiness is like being surrounded by telephone wires. So there's constant contact still with your child. Your child is your child for the rest of your life. okay? How they grow and how once they become adults, the interactions hopefully will be still just as strong as when they lived with you every day. Now we're going to speak about something people really don't like to talk about, but it's a part of the cycle of the lifespan, death and dying. Yes, this particular chapter asks you to really reflect and think. Okay, so yes, I do have another one. I want you to test your own level of anxiety in regards to when we talk about death and dying. Uh, Please rate yourselves on a scale that you've seen on a slide, being 0, not at all, 1, somewhat, or 2, very much. Okay, then take time and add up your score, and then I want you to compare it. The national average has been seen to be around 8.5 in terms of this scale. So when this same test was given out to people in the nursing home, senior citizens, as well as college students, there was no real significant differences, despite the fact that those tested ranged from 30 to 80 as far as age. So pause the video, take time to read each one, go ahead and use the Likert scale and place your number there, then add those up and see where you are in terms of when we're talking about death and dying. Now, what are the attitudes toward death and dying? As adults, we start to understand that death in terms of three basic concepts. The first one being permanence. It's once a living thing dies, it can't be brought back to life. The second thing is universality. All things living eventually will die. And then finally, the third one, non-functionality. All living functions, including our thoughts, our movements, our vital signs, it ends at death. So, of course, there's been research on the area, and it shows that permanence, the notion that death cannot be reversed, is that first and most easily understood concept. And being able to understand universality comes a little later on. And actually, that comes usually around the age of 7 for most children would have mastered non-functionality as well as have an adult-like understanding about death in itself. Now, Kubler-Ross, she came up with, well, she actually didn't originally come up with this. She actually expounded on it, this theory about dying going in different stages. So first stage is talking about denial of terminal condition. Well, a person might say this can't be true. It's got to be a mistake. From denial, the person will then move into anger. Well, why me? Why whoever the person that they might have lost? This is not fair. Bargaining may begin. If you're terminally ill, you might start saying, well, God, if you let me live, I'll dedicate my life to you. Fourth stage is moving into a state of depression. Okay, I'm losing everyone and everything that I hold dear to my heart. Then there's the fifth stage, and this is acceptance. I now know that death is inevitable and my time is near. Critics of this stage theory of dying stress that the 5-stage sequence really hasn't been scientifically proven or validated, and that each person's death is a unique experience. Others will worry that popularizing such stage theory may cause more avoidance as well as stereotyping of dying. Oh, he's just in the anger stage right now. Kubler-Ross kind of agreed that not all people will go through the same stages in the same way, and regrets that anyone would use her theory as kind of a model for a good death. There's no such thing as being able to, because we all experience it differently. But I think what Kubler-Ross was trying to point out is that these are the different areas that you might find yourself being within. There's no 100%. As I mentioned before, everything in life, there is no 100% guarantees toward that. The only thing you know that you can say is a guarantee is that you're going to be born, that you will live somewhat within your life, and then eventually you will die. Those are the guarantees. But when we're talking about death and dying, how one passes on is always going to be different from the other. Even if two people died of cardiac arrest, their experiences of that is going to be different. Okay? All right, so this here is, we're about to wrap up in terms of talking about development. And this is a grief and death review. Describe how preschoolers would view death. I want you to think about how you might have been when you was a child, how you thought about death. But I actually want you to think about this now for yourself. Try to match the following statements with Kubler-Ross's stage theory on death and dying. And this is going to be wrapping up our chapter on lifespan development. So we will get started on the next chapter, and I will talk to y'all later.